Welcome to the Trailbreaker Podcast. I'm Aaron Feinberg. In this podcast, I explore what it takes to be a trailbreaker. Through intimate conversations with people carving new paths across the landscapes of business, art, and sport, we dig in on how to excel across seemingly disparate endeavors. What drives people who manage to succeed multidimensionally? Is it how they think? Is it meticulous planning and follow-through? Or is it some measure of delusional optimism? My guest today is Brian Sloss, Director of Product Management at HomeLight, former founder of Disclosures.io, and a kelp pasta chef. We talked about how coaching has influenced his career, his evolution from product manager to founder, and what it's like when your company is acquired. Good afternoon, Brian, and thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Excited to be here, Aaron.
We have known each other for quite some time and have gotten to work together in a few different capacities, starting when you were a PM over at OPower, and then your transition into running your own company. And then as that company then got bought by another company. So why don't you take us back to the time in which you were working at OPower?
Yeah, it's been a good run. When I was working at OPower, I was a first-time product manager, and working with you, I learned a lot of the foundational skills, not only that I used as a product manager, but eventually I started my own company, Disclosures.io, and that company, as you mentioned, was acquired, and now I'm working at HomeLight, who acquired that company. And I just look back on our time together, and so much of those skills really stack up and work together that it was kind of instrumental in everything that I've done since then.
Well, it was my pleasure to get to work with you all those years. And, what was it about coaching that really worked for you, do you think?
I think sometimes you're going to have a really great mentor. And in that case, you're going to pick up what they do in all these different situations. But if you don't have that, having someone that can really give you playbooks and feedback in a way that helps you understand what is your style of communicating, what's your style of getting people to work together, that is such a valuable skill. And, that was really the thing that I think about of our time working together that I took away from that.
And what was it about OPower as a company that you were originally drawn to?
Oh man, OPower, such a cool company. Before I joined OPower, I was following them, and I thought what they were doing was so cool, which was helping utilities and utility customers like all of us in this country to save energy on their utility bill. And all I knew was that I wanted to work there. And I had essentially zero product manager experience. And I just doggedly emailed them, called them, knocked on their door a million times. And I think I just tired them out. And eventually they're like, he can do something. And so for me, OPower is really kind of where I learned a lot of my product management skills, how to work in a tech company, what a fast-paced growth company looks like. And from there, I really admired the founders of OPower. They ran such a cool company, and I really thought the impact they were having was amazing. And I think naively, it looked easy to me. They, like all experts, they make what they do look easy. And that inspired me to go start my own company, which was Disclosures.io. And when I left OPower to do that, I took a lot of those foundational skills that I learned working with you day in, day out, and applied that to starting a company from zero and growing it to a place where it was really successful, and then selling it to another company.
And we'll get into what your company Disclosures.io is all about. But before we do, so you basically beat down the door of OPower, were inspired to work with them based off their mission and their values, had no PM experience. And when you walked in and were hired, were you hired as a PM, or did they have you start at some other position?
Actually, I was hired as an associate PM, and it's not totally fair to say I didn't have experience. Maybe this is helpful. My first job really out of college, I was working at a company that helped other companies figure out what their environmental impact was. And so I had this big spreadsheet, and I just calculate how many miles all their employees drove and all these things like that. And I just happened to sit next to the developer for the website, and we got to talking, and he looked at my big spreadsheet, and we decided to turn that spreadsheet into a software application. I didn't really have any experience in this, but I was really helping him to translate all the rules and the business logic into software. And I didn't know that product management was a thing at the time, but that's what it was. And we turned this little spreadsheet into an application that actually became a business. And from there, I was super passionate about the environment and making a positive impact. And I was watching O-Power, and I wanted to do what I was doing at this other company at O-Power. So I had a little bit of product management experience, just in a pretty informal way.
Got it. And obviously you care about making a change. You care about, you're not afraid, it sounds like, to jump right in and try something new, and then stick with it. Because I know, through the course of us working together in that first round, I mean, we must have worked together for at least a year. Is that right?
Yeah, at least.
Okay. So maybe more. And, I remember vividly just, how much you took to the coaching process, and, really showed up as a client that, was reflective and willing to give stuff a shot. And, you always came to sessions with what you tried, what worked, what didn't. You really did the work of coaching. And that's also, I think, why it worked for you. And I think that that's an important thing for people to know, is that coaching can be amazing, but the person in your shoes really has to be game for the process.
Totally. I mean, it's not easy getting feedback, but feedback's such a gift. And if you can take that and turn that into growth, that's about as good as it gets.
Fantastic. And so you became a PM at O-Power, and then was that the final role you had before you jumped ship, or did you move up, up the ranks there at all?
I was a PM, and I worked on a whole bunch of different things and got exposed to different types of products and teams. And for me, that was so foundational, because I got to work with sales, and I got to work with engineering and design. And I really saw how all the different parts of a business fit together, and what greatness looks like there, just running at a really high level. And I was able to take a lot of that model, the things that really worked well there, and apply them to the company that I started.
And what gave you the gumption or the guts to make that jump? Because it's something that a lot of people talk about. They say they want to do it, or they're going to do it. And, you were, how old were you when you made the leap?
I was mid to late 20s. I think I was around 27. Okay. And it's interesting. I grew up, both my parents had their own small business. So my whole life growing up, they both ran their own company or their own business. And that just seemed normal to me. And over the years, I've learned that that's not what every parent does. And I think you take in a lot from your parents. If your parents work in companies, that seems normal. And so from the get-go, I just always saw my parents hustling. On weekends they were doing work, and that just really clicked for me. And so I think, one, just kind of my fear of jumping in was a little bit lower than it would have been otherwise. Two, at O-Power, both the founders were really inspirational and set a really good model, and that was motivating and inspiring for me. And then three, I just didn't know. I just didn't know how hard it's going to be, and what it was going to be like. I think if a lot of people did know just how challenging it can be starting a company, it would probably dissuade people. But that's what's great about taking the leap. You're not sure what's on the other side, and you just deal with whatever comes at you.
You are a delusional optimist, just like a lot of us.
Yeah.
And what was it about the founders of O-Power that you found so inspiring?
I mean, one, they were totally mission oriented. They, Dan and Alex, they both were totally motivated by the mission to reduce our energy footprint as a country, is in the world. So they were totally in it. But the other thing was, they had a desire for greatness within all the aspects and groups within the company. And I loved that. I actually remember them reading chapters from Peter Drucker's business book to the whole company. And like, it's just such a thing, like to care that much about exactly how we're running our business. And I thought that was really cool. So that was pretty motivating.
I did not know about the O Power story time.
Yeah.
So you make the you're at O Power, feeling like it's a company you align with. You dig the leaders, you love the mission. What transpired so that you decided, okay, now is the time to go start this thing? How did you? I understand that positive family influence and a little bit of delusional optimism, but was there anything else that came into the mix that said, okay, now is the time to make this leap?
Yeah, I mean, so my mom was a real estate agent, and I grew up just watching her do her job. And I remember it was a few years prior to starting the company, but we went and flew out to visit my grandma in Kentucky, and my mom had a deal going on while we were on this trip, and she needed to get a bunch of documents signed and coordinate a bunch of things, and there just wasn't a way at the time to do this online. She had to physically be there to close this deal out. And the deal ended up falling through. And obviously my mom was really upset. And, at this point I had been a PM and working in software, and it just blew my mind that you could not do this remote. It seemed crazy. And I really felt for my mom. And so at that point, I started to think there really is something here that, real estate is such an important part of society. And the fact that you have to physically be there to do it seems unreasonable. And so at that point, I started working actually with a buddy who was a real estate agent, and we started throwing ideas around, and eventually we settled on a couple of things that seemed like pretty sharp pain points for real estate agents today. And it just felt right. I don't have anything else besides that, this seemed like a really important problem to solve. And we started getting really good feedback around, oh yeah, I experience that problem all the time. And I jumped in.
So Disclosures was born, and how did it grow, or how big did it grow before you guys eventually sold it up?
Yeah, so we grew it to a pretty substantial size before. So we started the company and we built a prototype, and we just banged down doors. We went to every real estate agent that we knew. We showed it to them, and most of them, for disclosures, managing it online is a pretty sharp pain point. So as soon as they saw it, it was pretty clear, yes, this would really help them. And at that point, we actually went to YC, and YC was a really cool experience. Really took us from this is a nice little piece of software that works to a real company with a team that is on a pretty big growth trajectory. And from there, we had about 50,000 agents using disclosures.io every month. And we met up with HomeLight, which is another real estate tech company. And what was really cool was what we had built at the time was kind of the transaction management, is all the software that helps a real estate transaction work. And that was the exact piece that HomeLight needed. And so it was this really great fit. And, a year, almost 2 years in now, it's been a super good experience. Acquisitions don't always go well. And I'm really happy about this one.
Yeah, I would like to hear a little bit about what it's like to go back in-house. I've coached a bunch of folks who were brought into companies, fast-moving companies on acquisition, and yeah, many times it doesn't seem like it goes very well for them. And so, how has that transition been for you outside of being the two companies were a good fit, but you being the leader of Disclosures, and now what's your role at HomeLight?
Yeah, so I'm a director of product, and I really lead the experience that agents and clients have with HomeLight, it's been great. We've really grown our team. And, I totally understand the perspective of people who get acquired and it doesn't go well, because it is hard. You go from being the founder of your company, you call the shots, but you also have total responsibility for the decisions you're making, and you kind of live or die by those decisions. That can feel really empowering, and it's awesome. And when you join another company, it's no longer your company, and you really need to figure out the right way to work within that new dynamic. And frankly, it's a lot about letting go, which is a good thing to be able to do. And, it just, a lot of it comes down to people. The people that I work with at HomeLight are awesome. We've built a really good relationship, and I feel really good about. One of the hardest things about the acquisition was making this decision for all of our employees. They didn't weigh in on this, and the biggest thing that I was worried about was really they're going to have a new job with new coworkers, and I just don't know what that's going to be like for them. And thankfully, everyone was super happy, and that worked out really well. But that was probably the scariest thing, because those employees trusted you to take you on this journey, and this journey took a turn, and it's in a new place, and you really want them to be happy with where they ended up. And everyone has been really delighted so far.
That's also awesome, because I do know I've been with clients where they get acquired, and the new parent company is, whether it's not a company that they originally aligned with the values, or the transition process has not been smooth, or the culture is so different, it does sometimes create this big exodus. And the piece you were talking about, with this transition to founder, and then that out of foundership, a lot of what we hear sometimes is that founders are a unique breed, and it's really hard for them not to be anything other than a founder. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of people, but you're speaking to this ability to buck that sort of stereotype. And so letting go was something that you had to do. And is that something that you naturally are pretty good at doing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I really just think about, as a founder, what's your job? It's to figure out what does success look like and drive the whole team in that direction. And you can apply that no matter what your role is, or who you are. So maybe you're the founder of a company, but maybe you're a manager, and you're figuring out what does success look like for your team, and you drive your team in that direction. Maybe you're just an individual contributor. What does success look like for you? And you just plot out the map. How do I get there? And it's just about kind of changing the aperture and changing the lens that you look through everything. But everyone can apply that same mindset no matter what they're doing.
It's very much what we talk about in coaching. As the coach, I'm always asking, the person in your shoes at the start of the session, what would success look like? What would you like to accomplish? And I think if that question can be answered from the person inside, and it's tied to their intrinsic, behaviors and motivators, et cetera, then yeah, perhaps maybe it's easier to get away from yourself and look at what success looks like, not only for you, but for those around you, and lead from that position.
Yeah, 100%.
And do you think that, the staff at Disclosures and their smooth transition, obviously it was something you were concerned about, rightly so. What made that process mostly positive for them, do you think?
I mean, I think it's a couple of things. One, the type of person that joins really early at a startup, that's a specific type of person too. They're taking a big risk, and they're in for an adventure, and they know that. And so they were all pretty hardy to start. So that's one thing. But another is just one, I think no matter how good the acquisition process is, when you first get inside this new company or organism, you're just going to have to run around and figure out how everything works. And so you've got all these employees, everything from, how does HR work? Who does this? How does this part of the product work? You just got to do the work to go figure all that stuff out and get those answers for your team, because your team needs this stuff to be successful. And so there's a lot of just running it down. And then besides that, it was a good culture fit. So the people at HomeLight are awesome, and their culture was very similar to ours. So you can think of an acquisition kind of like getting an organ transplant, and the host body needs to accept this new unit, and that just comes down to compatibility. And so that really worked out well.
Really awesome. And how big was HomeLight when they acquired you guys?
I think they're about 300, and we were about 15. So that was the size ratio, but now HomeLight's about 700, and so it's gone through a lot of growth in the last year and a half since we were acquired.
Got it. And I didn't realize, and maybe that's has something to do with it too, with two companies that are somewhat on the smaller side, or yours on the
Yeah,
very small side.
yeah.
Makes sense. And and you may not be able to speak about this because I know that when companies are acquired and such, there's a lot that goes on behind closed doors. So feel free to punt if this isn't okay to talk about. But you obviously were worried about your people, and how much did they know that an acquisition was potentially coming down the pipe?
I don't think they knew that much. If you are the founder of a company and you're potentially doing an acquisition, it can just be really distracting for your employees, because companies go sniffing around for potential acquisitions really frequently, and you don't want to distract your team in case that doesn't come through, in case it doesn't end up working out in the end, because a lot of times it doesn't. And as a founder, one of your main responsibilities, as I mentioned earlier, is just figuring out what does success look like for your company and driving the team towards it. And so you want to keep them laser focused on that.
And I want to pull us back to the relationship with your mom. And I know you had recently lost her, and I know she played a pretty pivotal role in your life. Obviously she was a real estate agent, and some of the work obviously that you did, in your career was related to that. But if you're comfortable sharing a little bit about how else she impacted you and influenced you, it would be awesome to hear.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a journey. As I mentioned earlier, she was really the inspiration for the business that I started. And not only just because she was a real estate agent and I saw this clear pain point that she experienced directly, but she was just kind of my guide and mentor through so much of this. She ran her own business for my whole life, and when I started doing that, I would come to her, dealing with some sort of problem, and she was just so level-headed, and didn't have ego with things. And if you're able to take your ego out of business, that is just such an advantage, because that's the downfall of so many things that happen in business. And so each step of the way, I would just talk to my mom about what's going on, and she gave me such good advice that I carry with me today. And so, yeah, it was incredibly hard because she actually passed right after the acquisition. And that was just the hardest thing I've ever had to go through, is carrying this company through an acquisition, caring for my mom, and especially just with the super close relationship that I had with her and her relationship with this company. So it was a really hard time, and also a growth moment.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I'm sure she's looking down and pretty darn proud of all that you've become. So that's amazing. And in terms of how you continue to grow as a guy who has broken a few barriers and a few boundaries, what do you see as what's most exciting to you now, and where do you see you taking your career?
One of the things that I love business in general, because it is so dynamic. There's so many different aspects to it. It's kind of, if you're interested in it, there's no limit to what you can learn. And that's one of the reasons I really love product management, is you do get to interact with different aspects of business, of design, of engineering all the time. And so I'm totally focused on just going deeper. And I really enjoy that. I think the business that we're in at HomeLight is super interesting. Real estate is touches everybody, and it's a really part of just our fabric as a society. And there's just no shortage of problems to solve there. And so for me, understanding how a problem works, what's causing it, and working with a group of really talented people to come up with a way to solve that is super meaningful to me. And I think as far as growth, if you can just apply that pattern over and over, that's, you can have fun for a really long time doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the flip side, where do you struggle? You've done some really amazing things and had success, and you work hard through challenges, and you're not afraid to take feedback and look at yourself honestly. But where do you see your main pain points right now?
You know, it is, I think I mentioned, HomeLight's gone through a lot of growth, and what our team is now bigger than it was when we were running our own company. And, you hit these moments where everything seems like it's falling apart. And it's because you've added more people, and all of a sudden the ways that you used to work don't work anymore. And that, you can kind of plan for that, but it never really happens when you plan for it. And you find yourself in that situation, and it's super frustrating, but it's part of a cycle that if you can just be aware of, each time that happens, you come up with a new structure for how does your team work together? What are the processes? How do we change now that we have, another 20 people here? And that's been pretty hard, frankly. And that's definitely an area that I've really been trying to just be more cognizant of and aware of, looking for those early signs before things really start to break apart, to try to jump on it. But that's a really interesting problem, because again, each step along the way, it's a different thing that breaks, and it breaks in a different way.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, I hadn't thought about this before right now, but I was curious as a leader, how you coach your people. And the reason I was asking is because you obviously took to coaching, really well. You've got that low self-orientation, that humility, that empathy, and also so now you've kind of been there, done that in a few different ways. So you've got some credibility and some time on the ground. Do you find yourself coaching your people? And if so, does it come as naturally as I would think it might?
I mean, it's hard. And I think there's a couple of things that I always offer up when coaching others. Is just, one is people learn in different ways. Everyone has their own way of learning. And as a leader, you're going to have to, going back to what I said earlier, you're going to have to help them understand what does success look like, and helping them understand that it just may need a different medium depending on who you're talking to. And so communicating your vision, your plans, what you're working on in different ways is a really foundational skill to have as a leader.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, whether it's how people learn, how they process information, the speed in which they do, the ability to keep your ego out as a coach, or to be about the growth of others is such an important thing. And I think, you can do it by the book, but really where it lands is when you can do it with that artful connectivity, the genuineness, the authenticity that really makes it, it feels differently to the other person when you're not just sort of teaching them, the fundamentals.
100%. I mean, I think it is about authenticity, and I think it can be challenging if you're moving from, being maybe an individual contributor to a manager to a leader, that you authentically need to want the people that you're working with to be on board, to genuinely understand where you're going and why, and as opposed to making them know. And it really just comes down to asking more questions and doing less of telling and more of helping people to arrive on their own where they need to be, instead of pushing them into that position.
And in terms of what you have going on outside of the world of work, right? We spent most of our conversation talking about all these successes and the learnings, etc. So what's Brian doing when he's not at work or talking to me?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff there. I'm still really passionate about climate change, sustainability, and I've been messing around with some projects on the side. I've actually this sounds really weird, but I've been making pasta out of kelp, which is really cool because kelp sequesters carbon. And if there was some usage of kelp in mass quantities, you could actually take that carbon and sequester it long term, and maybe even create a way to drive the growth of more kelp. And so I've been doing weird stuff like making macaroni and cheese out of kelp, which is really cool. I live in San Francisco, and so I do a lot of long bike rides into the North Bay and on Mount Tam, and really just enjoying city life.
What's the kelp mac and cheese taste like?
It's pretty hard to beat the box of mac and cheese you had growing up, because this mac and cheese, it's gonna have a taste of the ocean. Some people really love that. It's pretty distinct. But what's really cool nowadays is the mac and cheese you grew up with the packet of powdered cheese, you can actually get pretty cool, high quality cheese in powdered form today. That's all natural, really good cheese. And if you match that up with other high quality ingredients, including the kelp, you've got a really good meal there. And, I think maybe it's going to take a little time to hit mass market, or for everyone to be like, yeah, I'm having that instead of craft. But it's a pretty cool thing to taste.
And I won't make you give up your secrets, but what shape is the pasta?
Ooh, that is actually. Found that I don't know what to call it, the sauce pretty well.
Oh, hold on 1 second. I think we had another technical glitch. Yes, it's telling me my internet is unstable. There we go. So my apologies. I was asking you what shape the pasta was, and I don't know if I stumbled on a proprietary secret.
No, not at all. If you can get the curly ones with more surface area, the sauce just really grabs onto it. So that's the best. I didn't think I was going to be talking about kelp pasta on this, but this is great.
Look, you're a guest because you are a trailbreaker in a variety of aspects of life. It isn't just your business world, my friend. You may be a budding, pasta maker for the masses.
There we go.
So last question on this: have you farmed out the pasta for taste tests and such, and what would people rate it at?
Let's just say it's still under development. I definitely had some taste tests. There was some feedback. I love nori. I love seaweed in general. So like the combination of seaweed and pasta to me is really awesome. But I think it's got some ways to go.
Fair enough. We'll have to wait till it gets on trend. So if people want to get a hold of you, pick your brain on anything, figure out what HomeLight's up to, how will they find you?
That's a good question. I don't actually have a huge online presence, but I know this will be posted on LinkedIn because I see it there sometimes. So definitely reach out to me through LinkedIn. And maybe what I could do is put my email into the show notes.
That's it. Only if you're comfortable with it. Folks can absolutely find you on LinkedIn, and you don't need to disclose any more about you than you're comfortable with. But if you would like to do that, then yes, you can send it to me, and I'll make sure that it's in the show notes. But look, Brian, it's amazing to watch kind of where you've come from the first day we met, and really awesome to see all the things you've created. And thank you so much for taking some time to join me on this show. And I hope that the rest of the year goes really well for you.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, it's just, you're a trailblazer as well. And it's been super cool to see what you've built here.
Well, I am definitely a delusional optimist, and it's been fun to start this Trailbreaker podcast and just have an opportunity to highlight the amazing guests and clients that I get to work with, and really let the world hear the stories that I'm lucky enough to hear in private that I cannot share. But if you join, then you can tell everybody everything.
I love it.
All right. Well, all the best, Brian, and thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Aaron.
Take care. The Trailbreaker podcast is created by Aaron Feinberg with production support provided by Michael Morey. More interviews and videos can be found at aaronfeinberg.com.